Hello and welcome to a new episode of Nile Magazine. Today we have a lot of interesting segments, so stay with us. Our first segment is Story of the Week, and in it I'll be interviewing Dr. Heba Nayef, the Vice Dean of Instructional Affairs at the Faculty of Language and Communication. It will be followed by the Eye of Horus, and in it we will be looking at some of the most important masterpieces at the Egyptian Museum of Antiquities. As for the cultural review, in it we will be enjoying the flamenco performance Carmina Burana. Finally, in Memories, we will be commemorating the memory of the late celebrity Egyptian actor Omar el-Hariri. Now it's time for Story of the Week. It's time to meet with Dr. Heba Nayef, the Vice Dean of the Instructional Affairs at the Faculty of Language and Communication. Dr. Heba is a very rich character. She studied at the Faculty of Linguistics. She studied English language at Al Alsun. Also, in addition to that, she studies translation. She is into actually international arbitration. In addition to Egyptology, she worked as a journalist for a while. She's a professor of media and mass communication, and for me, most of all, she's a feminist, and she's a very rich individual, and today we'll learn about her story of success. Now it's time to meet with Dr. Heba Nayef, the Vice Dean of Instructional Affairs at the College of Language and Communication in one of the most prominent universities. First of all, welcome with us, Doctor. And I'd like first to start by asking you, you actually, before studying mass communication, you started by entering the Faculty of Al Alsun and you studied the English and Linguistics. So why did you choose that major?
I am welcome to the Academy. First of all, it's like a dream, you know. I always dreamt of being a translator. I wanted to bridge the gap between cultures and nations. I was a child who was raised in Upper Egypt, in Minya. And as a child, I always dreamt of going abroad, and I always saw foreign people because Minya is a touristic site. So I wanted to tell them more about my country. And I thought, because I studied language at one of the missionary schools very early at 3 or actually 2, age of 2. So I said that I really want them to know more about my country and my culture. And I got inspired, so I said, okay, the best place is Al Alsun faculty, one of the very renowned, famous places there. And I wanted to study more of the English literature and having this idea that it's through language that you express your own identity, your own culture. And if you know the language of other people, you will get to know their own culture as well. And probably you will get to have this intercultural communication better.
Well, Doctor, before the interview, you told me that you're really interested in researches concerning the brain and the language. So would you tell me more about that and what you call the brain speech?
Actually, throughout my life, it has been like stages. You know, at first I had this dream of bridging the gap between cultures, and then I had these questions about how do you talk when we talk, and then I got this question: why do we make slips when we talk? Why do we say certain words in a wrong way? And I started searching what the field of neurolinguistics and psycholinguistics, and I started to construct what is called the speech model that allows for tongue slips or phenomena like the tip of the tongue phenomena. I got so much engulfed in this area for some part of my life.
Doctor, actually, that would require, in addition to mastering the language, also to start learning a bit about how the brain functions
Yes.
and maybe communicating with the neurologists. So tell me
Yes.
about that experience.
When I started this, psycholinguistics in Egypt is so much associated to second language acquisition, faculty of education. When I wanted for the first language acquisition, and I wanted to know how people learn to speak their language, and then what goes inside their minds. And I asked my, PhD supervisor, Dr. Abdurrahman Geber. I told him, I want to search this point. He encouraged me, and everybody else said no. So he was, God bless his soul, he was so much into this idea. He said, okay, it's a new trend in Egypt, go for it. And I started to read about neurology and the brain functions and the speeches areas in our brain. So I started to know the physiology of the brain, and that led actually to, and I like reading by nature. I'm what you can call a bookworm, so I read in all subjects and topics. So this topic for a certain time of my life enthralled me, and I was really happy about it. When I finished it, I jumped to something else, as I always do.
Yes, one of the things that you are interested in also is international arbitration.
Yes.
So tell me about your experience with it.
That was actually before the neuro-linguistics and psycholinguistics. I got so much, the one who raised me was, with my father, was an uncle who used to work as a judge. One of the vice presidents of the Court of Cassation. So I always saw him studying, cases and so on. So I got so much into this as a child, and I loved the judges and the legal system in Egypt. So I started to learn their terminology, and I went and got so much interested in the State Council in particular, because nobody actually paid attention to the State Council at that time. So I went, and then I worked there for a while. I told them I want to be trained there. I was very young, and then I got into translating. The current translation is mine of the law of the State Council, and it was a very beautiful experience. And from there, I went to international arbitration. And as a young person who's 21, I felt that I'm one of the soldiers of Egypt trying to, face the communities, the international community, and get Egypt's right back. Dreams of young people. And I had a couple of experiences with international arbitration, and I read about the London Court of International Arbitration. That was one station in my life as well.
What followed after that?
Followed after that, mass communication. I worked as a journalist for a while. I got into journalism, and I went to cover stories and so on for 1 year. And then I was sort of successful, I think. And then I realized that, no, I want something else. I want something more, fulfilling. I want something academic. And I was at that time one of the academic members. so I said, and part of being, part of the team of academia, you have to go for PhD and master and so on. So I needed, alongside with all my interests, to go for this. And that's why neurolinguistics and psycholinguistics were my station for the PhD. So I got the PhD in psycholinguistics, in particular in tongue slips. Yes, slips of the tongue. And I stayed 4 years collecting 1,134 spontaneous tongue slips. I carried a note and pad, and everybody who does commit a mistake, I would stop and ask him, why? What's the state of mind, etc. So it was something new, and I loved the experience. Later, then I got into, again, mass communication. And I said, okay, now I want to go for a cause, because I think that each one of us has to have a dream and a cause. And my cause was women. I come from a family who is so much, who believes so much in the rights of women. And my mom was a very active person. As a young upper Egyptian, she was very active. She went for stage, and she acted, and she lived a very beautiful, active life. And I wanted all women of Egypt to be as free and active as she is, and I wanted every person in Egypt to be as liberated and open-minded as my father. So I said, okay, now, where is the problem? I thought one of the problems, language, the way it is used in media, in everyday life, to disparage women. And I wanted to stop there and dedicate the rest of my life to this cause.
Actually, that would lead us to the question concerning your researches, because you've made many researches concerning women and how the media represented women, and actually you even discussed them abroad, several in Barcelona and in other countries. Now, would you tell us more about them and the main themes and topics that you've discussed?
As I told you, I had starting to have a cause in my life, and that cause was actually how to eliminate some of the injustices done to women through language. Because I think language does not only reflect our thoughts and ideologies, it actually forms the thoughts and ideologies. And language is being used in media and in everyday speech to present women in a way that would sediment the already fixed ideas we have about stereotypical image of women and the role of women and women. So I went and studied how women is presented in the media, in print media. For example, following the 30th of June events, everybody knew that we were there in the fields of the demonstrations and so on. And in both camps, actually, in Rabaa and in Tahrir. Many women in Tahrir were there, were in the forefront, and even the president himself at that time, the defense minister, he addressed women, and he said, take your husbands with you and go out and go for the squares of Egypt, and let us fight terrorism. Let's hear your words as you have done before. So that was the first time, I think, an Egyptian president from the time of Gamal Abdel Nasser addresses women directly and addresses them in a way of acting. They are the role of actors. They are the ones who are going to take the husbands with them and children. And this stopped me. I said, okay, now this is a new era in Egypt, a new era that I think if we stresses the rights of women, we will have them. And then I was in التحرير saying قالوا صوت المرأة عورة صوت المرأة هو الثورة. And at that particular moment I looked at my husband, I told him, I have to follow this. I have to do a research about this. And I read the Al-Ahram newspaper. And then I discovered with the millions of women in the streets, we were not there. And the question was, I was there, how did I become invisible? And I started to search the media coverage of political events, media representation of women in drama, in sitcoms, and so on, media coverage of women in talk shows, and I analyzed certain talk shows that actually presented women very negatively. One of them was the talk show of Yusri Fouda. I remember I did a research about this, and I said if it was what happened in his program, if it were in another country, he would have been dismissed automatically. So that followed certain researches, and I took my researches and went abroad to talk about Egyptian women in the media and their representation in the media.
Dr. Heba, actually, you're a rich character. You're interested in so many things. You've done so many things, so we still have to continue talking together in the next episode. But till then, I'd like to thank you very much. Thank you very much, Dr. Heba Nayef, the Vice Dean of the Instructional Affairs at the Faculty of Media and Communications in one of the most prominent universities here. Thank you very much, and it's still to be continued. Thank you, Doctor.
Thank you.
Now it's time for the Eye of Horus. Today we're coming to you from the Egyptian Museum of Antiquity, where we'll look into a special museum which is entitled Pharaonic Faces. Now, the first piece I'll start with is here. This is the wife of Nakhmin. It's an alabaster statue dating to the late 18th dynasty, to the reign of King I, the successor of King Tutankhamun, around 1327 BC. Actually, this beautiful piece, there is a portrait of it behind her, behind the statue itself. The statue was discovered in Luxor. Actually, it was a twin statue, one of her and one of her husband. Actually, it's beautiful. We can see the beautiful thick hair wig with all the beautiful braids, as well as the curls of the hairs, the various bands with the floral motifs tying the hair. She's wearing a beautiful draped dress, and one hand is showing with a cistern for the goddess Hathor with beautiful rosettes. It's one of the finest masterpieces here in this hall, and dating to the late 18th dynasty, and the portrait of it is just behind it. The exhibition here houses a variety of important faces and portraits for important pharaohs who changed the history of Egypt, including the portrait of King Ramses II, one of the main and most important as well as most famous pharaohs of the 19th dynasty, around 1279 BC. Actually, King Ramses II ruled for more than 64 years. He died in his 90s. He was one of the great builders in Egypt. Everywhere we find great buildings for him, like the rock-cut temple of Abu Simbel, several temples in the area of Nubia, as well, of course, as the grand pylon with the beautiful edifice of the Luxor temple, many buildings, including that of the huge colonnaded hall of the Karnak temple and more. He is considered one of the great warrior kings who led several campaigns to the north and south of Egypt, including holding one of the oldest and most important peace treaties in the history of the world with the kingdom of the Hittites. As for the portrait inspired by King Ramses II, actually the original statue is one of the statues standing in front of the Luxor temple. But here behind me there is a beautiful piece for Ramses II located at the Egyptian Museum of Antiquities. It's out of grey granite, and as I've mentioned earlier, that King Ramses II of the 19th dynasty, around 1279 BC, the son of Seti I and the grandson of Ramses I, the warriors and the founders of the 19th dynasty and the restorers of Egypt back to glory. We can see the king seated on the throne, and he's wearing the Atif crown. It's a composite crown of the god Osiris, and beside him there is a goddess. Her name is Anat. She's not Egyptian, she's Asian, and she's also a protectress goddess, one of the goddesses of war. And because the Egyptian influence reached all the way to the Euphrates, so we brought some of these gods here in Egypt also as protective deities, including that of the goddess Anat. She's also wearing the Atif crown, which is a composite crown, a mixture of the white crown of Upper Egypt with two feathers, which it's actually the crown of the god Osiris, and two horizontal horns. And we can see her slightly touching the shoulder of Ramses II, which is a sign of protection by the goddess. Here she's typically depicted in an ancient Egyptian form with the Egyptian hair wig, the Egyptian crown, even the Egyptian dress, and also the Egyptian facial features. We can see the coronation name of King Ramses II in the middle, which is Usur Ma'at Ra Setep in Ra, which is that or the power or the glory, the strength of the god Ra, the chosen by Ra. And of course Ramses or Ra Misu is his birth name, but it's not located on the front of the statue but on the back of it. And we can see giving him life, the Ankh sign, the key of life, to say that the goddess is blessing the king with life as well. The portraits of the family of King Tutankhamun dominates today's exhibition, whether his father, King Akhenaten, as well as the wife of King Akhenaten, Nefertiti, as well as Tutankhamun himself. Several portraits for the royal family, including that of Akhenaten behind me. Akhenaten is the monotheistic king who introduced the cult of the Aten, the worship of the hidden power behind the solar disk. His real name was Amenhotep IV, but he changed his name to Akhenaten or Akh-en-Atun, and he moved the capital from Luxor to the Amarna area in Armenia. Also, not only that, he introduced a new genre and a new style of art with its own unique specific features, with an elongated face, narrow elongated eyes, a very thin and elongated nose, as well as mouth as well, a broad hips, a long head, and all these till now are debatable. Are these his real features, or they are a religious symbolism for the new religion and contradiction to the classical style which represented the old cult, the cult of the god Amun-Ra at the time. Akhenaten's rule marked, unfortunately, the downfall of the 18th dynasty, the great warriors dynasty, because he tended to be more peaceful. Many of the northeastern states belonging to Egypt claimed independence, and Egypt started its period of decline. But fortunately, with I ascending and later Hormoheb following his son Tutankhamun, because Tutankhamun succeeded him, following that a great warrior like Hormoheb, then later on Ramses I and Ramses II, of course, following Seti first, they all managed to restore the new kingdom to its ancient glory. We have seen together the portrait of King Akhenaten, and now let's look at the original statue which inspired the artist. Actually, it's located as part of many beautiful artifacts dating to the Amarna era, the time of the rule of King Akhenaten, who ruled around 1350 BC, the 18th dynasty, the new kingdom. Akhenaten, originally his name was Amenhotep IV. He was the son of Amenhotep III and Queen T. He ruled for 17 years, and during the 5th year of his rule, he changed his name from Amenhotep the Fourth to Akhenaten, which means the living spirit of the god Aten. And then later on he moved the capital to Amarna, which he called Akhetaton, or the horizon of the god Aten, as I've mentioned earlier. The style of art itself is unique, it's very exaggerated, but then by the end of his rule it starts to be more naturalistic. It's known for the uniqueness of it, where you can see the royal family sitting together, you can see the children on the lap, you can see the father kissing his children, which is something uncommon in the classic ancient Egyptian art. And as I mentioned before, there are several reasons behind such a shift in the religion. Either that it's his tendency toward the monotheistic faith, or actually there are a lot of Egyptologists now who believe that actually it was a fight from the royal family against the strength of the priesthood of the god Amun-Ra, the main god of the country at the time. His beautiful wife Nefertiti was very popular. It is said that she also played a strong role in ruling as well. She has the beautiful head in the Berlin Museum, and we have seen together a portrait of it, which also we show it to you right now. It's a beautiful gallery, and now let's explore it together. One of the most important figures who shaped the history of ancient Egypt is Hatshepsut, the lady pharaoh, who lived during the 18th dynasty around 1479 BC. She came to the throne following the death of her brother and husband Thutmose II, and she ruled for 21 years. She started as co-regent for her son-in-law as well as her nephew Thutmose III, but then she managed to grasp the throne and she ruled as a pharaoh. She dressed up as a pharaoh and she got depicted as a pharaoh, except in very few rare cases. She was one of the strongest queens who ruled Egypt, and she's almost the only queen who would claim herself as pharaoh. Usually those queens who ruled the country as pharaohs, they ruled at the end and during the decline of their families, when there were none of the bloodline left. But Hatshepsut ruled during the glory and the beginning of the 18th dynasty, and one of her greatest achievements was to restore the country back to stability, because she was almost the third or fourth in line following the Hyksos invasion. So the early kings of the 18th dynasty, they had to carry on their shoulders the restoration of the country. Of course, she has many great and important buildings, including that of her mortuary temple, the Deir el-Bahari temple on the west bank in Luxor. She disappeared suddenly. Then her successor, Thutmose III, when he came to power, there are talks that he destroyed her images because she usurped his rule. Now there are debate and doubt about it. Also, her temple suffered a lot from the followers of King Akhenaten, who destroyed the images of the god Amun-Ra, the god of the area of Luxor and Egypt at the time. Now we will be looking at the portrait, and also we'll be looking at the original statue of Hatshepsut. Behind me there is a beautiful granite statue of Queen Hatshepsut holding two jaws in her hands, which we call in ancient Egyptian the Nu jaws, meaning the liquid libation jaws. This statue was brought from the Karnak temple together with many other beautiful granite statues of the queen. And as I've mentioned earlier when we were talking about her portrait, that actually she ruled for 21 years as a lady pharaoh, the first real lady pharaoh in the history of Egypt, and also she was a successful one. If we look at the statue, she's depicted as a pharaoh with the Nemes headdress, which is the royal headdress, the cobra on the forehead. She's depicted as a man, bare-chested, and she is wearing the shindit, or the royal kilt, in a kneeling position, presenting the liquid libation in the Nu jars to the god Amun-Ra. And we're saying Amun-Ra because this statue was discovered and found in the Karnak temple in Luxor, which is one of the main temples for the cult of the god Amun, his wife Mut, and his son Khonsu, the main god of the country at that time. Now it's time for the culture review. It's time to head to the Cairo Opera House to enjoy the flamenco performance Carmina Burana. The Ballet Flamenco de Madrid held its performance Carmina Burana and Fiesta Flamenca recently on the Cairo Opera House's stage. Carmina Burana is the bright scenic cantata of Carl Orff that has been hailed by audiences worldwide since it was released in 1937. Orff developed a dramatic concept he called Theatrum Mondi, in which music, movement and speech were inseparable. Carmina Burana was intended as a stage work involving dance, choreography, visual design and other stage action. The piece is now usually performed in concert halls as a cantata.
الحقيقة مشاركتنا النهاردة هي مش هتكون مشاركة كبيرة.
Today we're participating with two songs that the Ballet Flamenco de Madrid will dance to its music and songs. We carefully chose the songs to suit the flamenco tempo. There are so much in common between the Egyptian and the Spanish music, including the tempo beat and music filled with emotions. So our troupe was keen to perform with them. The performance acquired great success. The hall was full throughout the various performance nights, and the public thoroughly enjoyed the show.
اوتوماتيكلي يعني حسيت بيه.
The mixture of these 20 profane and sacred medieval poems with the steps in this Spanish genre is an attractive bet that the dancers of the company versioned to obtain great success wherever it goes.
My name is Rania Al-Abd, and I'm here at the Cairo Opera House this evening to watch the flamenco performance. I'm enjoying the dance very much. I've taken work in flamenco dancing years ago, and I feel very passionate about flamenco dancing. It's a dance that's full of pride, it's full of passion, sensuality, and the contrast between the smooth flowing movements expressed by the dancers and their sharpness and their focus and the rhythm they create with their clapping of their hands and the tapping of their feet is really exquisite, and I really enjoy it. It's a beautiful dance.
Over the years, many shows have been mounted around the great work of the German composer, but none with flamenco as its centerpiece. Ballet Flamenco de Madrid dares to perform Carmina Burana, which for the first time is carried out through flamenco. Following the performance of Carmina Burana, the Ballet Flamenco de Madrid performed Fiesta Flamenca on Amr Diab's song Habibi ya Noor al-Ain. Today in Memories, we're commemorating the memory of the late celebrity Egyptian actor Omar al-Hariri, who passed away on the 16th of October 2011. Omar al-Hariri was born in 1926. He graduated from the High Institute of Theatre in 1947. As a child, he participated in the well-known film Salam Afkhir. Straight out of school, al-Hariri continued his career on the stage of the National Theatre and Yusuf Wahbi Theatre. The play El-Ghira, Jealousy in 1948 was his first stage role. Al-Hariri also performed in a number of successful shows such as إنهم يقتلون الحمير, They Are Killing Donkeys, and مسرح Cleopatra, Cleopatra's Death. In 1950 he acted in his first major cinema role in Avocado Madiha, Madiha the Lawyer. Al-Hariri traveled to Libya and established the National Theatre there in 1968. After lecturing about theatre and arts in Libya until 1976, al-Hariri returned to Egypt and enriched the Egyptian cinema and TV with a number of remarkable roles.
استنى نعناع، معاك ريال؟ معاك ريال؟ معاك ريال؟ اتفضل 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 اتفضل. تشكر يا أستاذ. العفو.
Omar al-Hariri performed in 180 films, 85 TV series, and 32 plays. Some of his most beloved works are الواد سيد الشغال, سيد the Servant Boy, سكر هانم, Lady سكر, ساكن قصادي, My Neighbor, البنات, The Girls, عمر المختار, and موعد مع الحياة, Appointment with Life.
في واحد مأذون هيجي هنا دلوقتي.
أيوه.
تمضي. يومين 3 ويجي نفس المأذون.
أيوه.
تمضي. وخلاص.
دي البطيخة.
Omar al-Hariri passed away on the 16th of October 2011 at the age of 86. By this, we come to the end of today's episode of Nile Magazine. Until we meet again in a new episode, it's goodbye.